never fit in. Born to two zombies in a world that had learned to survive behind walls and wires, a JV lived a secret life, an awkward boy with vivid green eyes who learned how to hide what he truly was so his mother could survive. Then the city fell apart in a single terrifying roar. A routine shift at the supermarket became a nightmare. Co-workers attacked, the boss transformed, and the hungry dead surged forward. In the chaos, a JV stopped pretending. His arm became a saw. His shame became a blade. He tore through the horde and saved a life, revealing a power none of them expected. The videos spread. The cameras showed a small figure cutting down a monstrous corpse king, and questions followed faster than rumors. Who was the headless boy throwing his own skull as a weapon? Why could he not die? As soldiers sealed the streets and investigators examined the wreckage, a daughter of the city's elite watched him closest. Fong Yu, armor and nanotech at the ready. And in the shadows, Jiang Shi smiled. The creature he'd been waiting for had finally appeared. School became a battlefield, and every time he moves, the world notices. This is a story about what it means to be human in a world that has already rewritten the rules. A monster born among monsters, a hero no one asked for, and a future that will force everyone to choose sides. At last, everyone learned the truth about his real identity, surprising them all since had always appeared to resemble a zombie the most. He appeared to be a striking young man whose vivid green eyes seemed to shine. Even more astonishing was the fact that he was the very first child to be born from two zombie parents. Many years in the past, a sudden surge of zombies had overtaken the entire world. Humanity, driven by a fierce will to endure, retreated to the farthest corners of the earth. There, they constructed towering barriers as their last defense against the relentless undead. Armed only with basic tools, they fought desperately to protect themselves. One day, the formation of a new military unit completely altered the course of events. The group included individuals whose strength could be even more fearsome and ruthless than that of the zombies. They found comfort in their own company. Within a decade, they successfully forced the zombies to retreat. The zombies that had been caught were repurposed as living sources of energy. Some people were treated as mere objects, lined up and sold to the highest bidder. People had constructed special zoos filled with zombies, designed solely to amuse and entertain visitors. The remaining zombies who managed to get away banded together in small, scattered groups, driven to conceal themselves in the most remote corners of the world. Their struggle to stay alive forced them to drink leftover oil and pick through garbage for anything useful. After countless years spent roaming aimlessly, a female zombie finally started to regain her sense of awareness. She found herself puzzled by the remarkable strength of humans and wondered how they had managed to create such advanced societies. She started copying their routines, eating 3 times a day, turning in early at night, and rising with the sunrise. Ultimately, she arrived at a realization. Humanity's ability to create civilizations stemmed from their capacity to reproduce. She began to mimic their behavior, roaming the city streets each day in hopes of drawing attention from potential partners. One day, to her astonishment, she realized that she was indeed expecting a child. After enduring an exhausting 13 months, she became the mother of the world's first zombie child, choosing to call him V. Had endured a childhood filled with hardship and sorrow. Ever since his mother had become the sole expectant zombie, she found herself the focus of unfriendly glares, subjected to cruelty, and isolated by others of her own species. After the birth of their child, JV, her family rejected her entirely, viewing her as something unnatural. In her effort to safeguard and nurture her baby boy, she wandered through devastated cities, seeking acceptance among various zombie groups. Yet on each attempt, the others shunned her, treating her as an outsider. In the end, she decided to live close to where humans resided, believing it would be best for AJV's future. Despite her terrifying looks, she knew she could never walk freely among people. Surviving by pleading for scraps on the streets made them feel as helpless as a small child, just managing to stay alive. Under the watchful eye of his undead mother, JV gradually matured, spending his entire life hidden among humans in the city, skillfully concealing his true identity. As he matured, and with humans now requiring mandatory schooling, a JV started going to classes in the daytime. During the evenings, he took on shifts at various little stores, relying on his zombie-like endurance to keep exhaustion at bay. On weekends, he juggled several jobs at once, determined to support with the household expenses. There were times when an intense craving to consume humans threatened to overtake him, yet he managed to restrain himself through sheer willpower. His mother had put her own safety on the line to bring him to this place, wishing that he might experience life as an ordinary person. He quietly promised himself that he would dedicate himself to his studies, determined that in the future he would earn enough to buy his mother a car and a spacious home with his own efforts. However, the city's sense of normalcy was abruptly destroyed when an unexpected zombie outbreak swept through the streets. Odd JV, faced with no other way to help his upperclassmen, was forced to expose his secret and undergo a startling change, becoming a zombie right before their eyes. On his initial day at the job, after dismissing the manager of Mill Powder Store Number 1, his entire life changed dramatically. On that particular day, V, who was 17 years old, began his job at a supermarket thanks to a recommendation from an older student. The senior noticed him standing idly and chastised him, urging him to stop daydreaming and get to work without delay. He snapped back to reality, hurriedly moved ahead, and retrieved the box from her grasp. At that moment, a sense of relief washed over her, escaping in a gentle sigh. She quickly observed the injuries marking his face. Without a moment's pause, she quickly tugged him down to crouch behind the counter. He gently treated the wounds and wondered aloud whether he had faced bullying once more. In reality, being a zombie surrounded by humans filled him with fear. Because of his shyness, he often found himself singled out and picked on by bullies. The senior explained to him that people could be unkind, and that bullying was a common occurrence. The senior pointed out that showing weakness would only make him a target, but if he stood up for himself, others would be too afraid to bother him. The senior made sure he understood this lesson. JV kept his gaze downcast and quietly acknowledged that he understood. At that moment, the manager of the supermarket approached and reminded the staff to welcome the arriving customers. A truck arrived and came to a stop outside. At first, JV assumed that C was the one bringing supplies for the townspeople, but it was only an ordinary transporter instead. The older student moved quickly toward the shelves, scanning them intently in search of the items that had been asked for. As she leaned over to examine the labels more closely, the boss emerged unexpectedly behind her and raised his phone to take some pictures, noticed and witnessed the entire incident. The boss shifted his attention in his direction, quickly averted his gaze, stumbling over his words as he insisted he hadn't witnessed a thing. Despite any hesitation, the boss seized the boy by his collar, baring his teeth in a menacing snarl and warning him to stay silent. He instructed him to bring the driver over to the warehouse so they could load the cargo. As they traveled, the driver cautioned him that the boss had a notorious reputation in the area. He entices female college students by promising generous wages, only to exploit them afterward. The senior girl might not be able to get away from his grasp. Thoughts raced as she struggled to decide whether to intervene or remain quiet. Without warning, a spine-tingling roar resounded from far away. He recognized the noise instantly, its familiarity sending a chill down his spine. The city came under siege as zombies began their assault. The driver stuck his head out of the window, his eyes darting anxiously along the bustling street. Despite being addressed, JV paid no attention. Instead, he sprang from the truck and dashed directly toward the supermarket. As he reached his destination, the scene that unfolded before his eyes rendered him speechless with shock. Outside the entrance of Mill Powder Number 1 supermarket, those who had been bitten had already begun to transform. The infected boss forcefully pushed the senior down onto the floor. With a sinister smile, he pushed her legs apart, declaring that since he was doomed regardless, he would claim her as his own before his end came. Before he managed to complete his sentence, his expression froze, signaling that something was amiss. As his body started to transform, his cheek contorted and changed shape. A piercing cry escaped from the senior's lips. Upon hearing those words, a sudden jolt ran through JV's heart. He stood motionless, caught in a struggle of uncertainty. His mother's caution lingered in his thoughts, reminding him how difficult it was to get to this city. She had always insisted he stay out of trouble and never reveal his real self to anyone. He had put up with the shame for so long, quietly accepting every harsh word thrown his way. At the sight of his senior in peril, he found himself unable to restrain his power any longer. In an instant, his left hand transformed into an enormous, menacing saw. Before their eyes, his features transformed, with both his face and hair altering in appearance. In an instant, he transformed into the unusual JV that everyone recognized. The zombies lunged forward, baring their teeth with menacing growls, swung his blade with swift precision, moving so quickly that he seemed to disappear and materialize behind his opponents like a fleeting shadow. Rain hammered the pavement, filling the street with sharp, splattering noises that echoed through the air. In mere moments, the zombies were swiftly sliced apart. At the very moment the transformed boss extended its hand toward the elder, a wet, gruesome sound filled the air as his body was sliced perfectly into two separate pieces. A senior finally found the courage to lift her eyelids once more. She watched as JV sliced into the boss's lifeless body, his jaw tight with anger. Under his breath, he dared the fallen boss to stand up and challenge him once more, refusing to be intimidated. At this point, the boss had been reduced to a heap of twisted, broken remains. Shaken by fear, the upperclassman tightly closed her eyes, unwilling to witness what was happening any further. At that moment, a group of zombies lurched in their direction, moved into the entrance, standing firmly in the way. His tone grew icy as he warned that taking another step would result in death. On his very first day at the job, JV accidentally sliced his boss completely in two. After his work was done, he took his payment and used it to purchase meat that was almost spoiled. His heart raced anxiously as he made his way home, dreading whatever awaited him. On the very first day at work, work, the protagonist found themselves responsible for the boss's death, already dreading how they would ever break the news to their mother. Soon, he reached a dilapidated apartment complex. He paused briefly in the entrance, hesitating before stepping inside. At last, he summoned his bravery and eased the door open. In the kitchen, a strikingly attractive female zombie herself was preparing a meal. Her face lit up with happiness as she noticed JV return, and she enthusiastically invited him to sit down, letting him know that dinner was ready. Following the zombie attack in the city, law enforcement officers blocked access to the affected zone. At the edge of the devastation, a girl with striking red hair gazed at the wreckage, her mind filled with troubled thoughts. Being the sole person to make it out of Milk Powder #1 supermarket alive, the senior recounted her experience to the press. Throughout her statement, she left out any reference to JV, insisting instead that fear had overwhelmed her, causing her to lose consciousness and leaving her with no memory of the event. At that moment, a subordinate walked up to the red-haired girl, handing her the surveillance footage they had managed to retrieve. Displayed on the screen was a startling image. JV fiercely battling a gigantic Type A corpse king. The girl accepted the tablet that her subordinate handed to her. On the screen, JV brandished his chainsaw with wild, untamed energy. The enormous Type A corpse king, towering several times larger than him, was split in two before it could even respond. The subordinate gestured at the fissures snaking along the highway, while a nearby skyscraper stood broken cleanly in half. The small zombie proved to be exceptionally fierce. After tearing the corpse king into tiny fragments, he consumed every bit of what remained. The focus returned to who was now at home. His mother carefully adjusted his outfit and gently reminded him of the importance of paying attention to his teachers while he was at school. JV responded with a noisy belch, causing his mother's cheerful expression to disappear. She looked at him with a serious face and questioned whether he had eaten something he shouldn't have. He, clearly embarrassed, hastily claimed he hadn't eaten anything before rushing out the door. As they wandered along the street, their mind drifted with uncertainty, searching for a plan for what to do next. Without warning, someone placed a firm hand on his shoulder. A playful voice echoed through the air, asking the class representative what was occupying his thoughts, and jokingly suggesting he might be daydreaming about an attractive girl. JV immediately stiffened, caught off guard by the sudden surprise. Standing before him was the mayor's daughter, whose mother also held a prominent position as a senior officer. Trying to avoid revealing his emotions, swiftly averted his gaze and in a quiet, uncertain voice, inquired about her reason for approaching him. Let out a cheerful laugh, assuring the other person that she had come for tutoring. She acknowledged that they were the best student in their entire grade. From a hidden spot, one girl quietly wondered to herself, puzzled as to why the city's princess would be interested in someone who spent all her time with books. Someone else let out a mocking laugh, thinking that if defeating zombies was as simple as studying, everyone would treat him like a hero. With Fang's notes in hand, JV furrowed his brows, silently questioning the accuracy of the upgrade algorithm for parts, considering Fang's background in a military family. Let out a weary sigh, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. The strange zombie that had appeared downtown the day before was the root of all the troubles. Family had insisted on finding out more about it, but there was still schoolwork to manage. The fear of making mistakes while juggling these responsibilities weighed heavily on his mind. Upon hearing those words, JV felt a sudden constriction in his chest. He swiftly masked his emotions with a composed look and smoothly shifted the conversation, pretending to review the lesson material. At that moment, noticed JV's clothing and wondered silently about the unusual appearance of JV's shirt. Just as she was about to complete her thought, a sharp, chilling scream rang out from somewhere in front of her. A flock of birds collided with an Airbus A380. The enormous jet began to nosedive, its engines giving out without warning. Panic swept through the area as civilians let out terrified screams and rushed away, fleeing in all directions. Stood motionless, her body tensing as she spotted the scene, every muscle poised to bolt alongside the fleeing crowd. At that moment, a woman holding her baby lost her balance and tumbled to the ground right in his path. A surge of surprise rushed through his body, almost triggering the change as he instinctively himself to transform. Without warning, a loud snapping sound echoed from the area behind him. A luminous gadget in his grasp emitted the unexpected noise. Machinery burst into action, filling the air with a sharp staccato rhythm. Nanobots moved in dense clusters along her arm, covering her skin as they advanced. In the blink of an eye, a complete suit of armor formed around her, covering her from head to toe. She lowered herself quickly until she was crouching close to the ground. She steadied herself, lowering into a runner's position, and focused her attention on the plummeting plane. A sudden rush of wind accompanied her as she soared upward into the air. With incredible speed, suddenly materialized beneath the approaching aircraft. laughed. As her mechanical arm transformed for battle, advanced nanotechnology shaped it into a legendary oversize. A second sharp hiss sliced through the air. A single blow sliced the A380 cleanly into two parts. Passengers erupted from the wreckage, tumbling uncontrollably through the air as if they were kites with their strings suddenly cut, hurtling toward the earth below. At that instant, lifted her arm and positioned herself as if she were about to hurl a javelin. She swung her enormous sword downward, sending it crashing toward the city streets beneath her. In an instant, the weapon shattered into a multitude of tiny blades. Every strike landed precisely, tearing through the passengers' clothes with flawless accuracy. The structures on either side of the street rose high, their surfaces becoming hosts to whatever embedded itself within them. The passengers held, leaving him suspended in the air, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. In a flash, they transformed into the most dazzling and unusual sight the avenue had ever witnessed. At the same time, and the damaged jet crashed toward the earth together. At the exact same moment, both of them crashed onto the ground with a deafening roar. The A380 tore apart into two distinct sections, each crashing forcefully onto the road and landing on opposite sides. When the threat faded away, the crowd broke out in enthusiastic applause. They marveled at the sight of the young woman's advanced nanotech armor, finding it truly astonishing. The sound of enthusiastic praise filled the air all around them. Held her sword with unwavering confidence, striking an impressive pose as she enjoyed the admiration radiating from the crowd around her. At the same time, elsewhere, the woman who had previously collapsed slowly regained consciousness, her eyes flickering open as a startled gasp escaped her lips. With just one hand, managed to keep the entire plummeting airplane suspended in midair. With effortless strength, he flung the heavy debris away and extended a hand to assist her in standing. The woman pulled back without thinking. To her, no longer appeared as a rescuer. Instead, he had become a frightening and unfamiliar presence. Fang glanced over her shoulder, driven by a sense of curiosity. The remains of the plane obstructed her line of sight. She remained oblivious to the events that had just unfolded. Afterward, the pair made their way back to school side by side. During the lesson, the teacher spoke to the students while referencing a hefty history textbook, kept his eyes fixed on AJV, never looking away. At the same time, paid close attention as the lesson about human history unfolded. The world endured the zombie apocalypse thanks to the actions of one individual. Many years ago, a remarkably talented youth named Yin rose to the position of lead programmer at a prominent technology company, achieving this distinction at an unusually early age. His remarkable abilities captivated many, earning him widespread praise and attention. As soon as the zombie outbreak started, nothing remained the same. Human civilization steadily lost ground, retreating bit by bit, until people found themselves confined to a single continent, bordered entirely by vast oceans. During the struggle with the undead, it became clear that warriors were in demand, not computer programmers. The weak young man, whose skills were limited to typing, ended up losing his job. Despite everything, he understood on a profound level that the software he developed had the potential to reshape the course of human history. Nobody thought his words were true. He retreated to his room and shut himself inside, driven solely by determination. They spent countless days and nights programming without taking any breaks. He repeatedly went over his work, making improvements each time. Time slipped away as days gradually faded into nights, and those nights quietly stretched into years. The man who had once been admired for his good looks and remarkable talent gradually transformed into a weary, unkempt elder with thinning hair. Ultimately, he managed to invent the world's inaugural suit of nanotechnology armor, powered by nuclear energy. Teetering on the edge, where society threatened to fall apart. Without a moment's pause, he moved ahead and triggered the suit's activation. The overwhelming power of the first-generation mech surged forth. He fought off the approaching zombies, securing a safer future for all of humanity. From that moment forward, everyone recognized him as a hero and honored his bravery. Even as the days slipped by and the years slowly vanished, his legacy lived on through his descendants, who continued to safeguard humanity for many generations. Once the lecture ended, a wave of excitement swept through the classroom as students chatted energetically. Despite everything happening around her, kept her gaze fixed on AJV, thoughts swirling in her head. She refused to believe she was mistaken. The outfit he wore matched exactly. He was the same zombie she had seen that night. At the same time, quietly wondered why matches were necessary when humans possessed advanced thermal weaponry capable of obliterating zombies with a single shot. Fawn abruptly interrupted the conversation, displaying his keen perception. The others acknowledged his insight, admitting that he was correct. There truly was a concealed secret behind everything that was happening. Before revealing the truth, the speaker insisted on receiving an answer to a single question, proposing this condition as the only way forward. Once gave a nod of agreement, at last started to talk. Just days earlier, she had stumbled upon her father engaged in a disturbing task. He, the zombie zombies with advanced nanotechnology armor. During her persistent questioning, her father finally confessed the reason. The mech's full potential could be brought out solely by zombies. Although the armor possessed boundless energy, operating it demanded an immense amount of stamina from any human pilot. In contrast, only the undead, who never tired, could achieve a flawless union with a powerful suit. Throughout the ages, the deterioration of their family's lineage prevented them from ever returning the mech to its former glory. Because of this, he resorted to experimenting on zombies. Felt utterly confused, she wondered why anyone would invent something so horrifying when their current weapons were already powerful enough to defeat the zombies. Her father's face darkened with worry, a reflection of the constant threat of extinction that still loomed over their world. Something was out there, its true nature unknown, whether human or zombie. Yet, if it wished, it possessed the power to destroy them effortlessly, just as someone might squash an ant. The creature appeared to have an immortal nature, surviving from ages long past to the present day, its presence concealed somewhere within the world. Upon hearing the revelation, his expression contorted with disbelief. The idea of living forever seemed impossible to comprehend. Was such a thing truly possible in their world? Responded with a calm demeanor, explaining that this secret had been handed down within his family for many generations. He revealed that the entity in question was known as Jiangxi. Now it was their chance to pose a question. They wanted to know if the person standing before them had been the one responsible for defeating the Corpse King in the city center and rescuing the civilians. O was startled by an alarm and immediately jumped up, insisting that they had mistaken him for someone else. Without giving her a chance to respond, he rushed out of the room. His frantic departure only made Phil even more suspicious. From that point forward, you began to secretly follow AJV everywhere he went, whether AJV was brushing his teeth, jogging, or even just walking to the restroom. Once school ended, AJV hurried out, moving quickly and making sure not to lose a moment. Fawn naturally trailed closely after. The boy had seemed suspicious ever since the day the narrator boarded the plane. It was clear he was keeping a secret. Cast a wary look behind him, his nerves evident in his uneasy movements. He unexpectedly bumped into another person and crashed to the ground. As he glanced upward, he noticed a group of street thugs standing in his way, preventing him from moving forward. Fang arrived just in time to witness everything as it happened. Rather than getting involved, she decided to remain on the edge, silently observing the scene. Without warning, a member of the group lashed out and punched squarely in the face. Worried that defending himself might reveal who he really was and cause his mother to relocate once more, he chose to act helpless, pretending to be vulnerable and pitiable. The thug grabbed AJV's book and gave a mocking smile, clearly looking down on him. He dismissed AJV as a worthless nobody, complaining that dealing with him was just a pointless bother. With that action, he delivered a powerful kick to Ah, knocking him off his feet and sending him crashing to the ground. With laughter bubbling among them, the group confidently made their way down the street together. Upon seeing AJV in such a pitiful condition, gradually let go of her doubts. She averted her gaze, trying to reassure herself that her thoughts were unfounded, reasoning that the matching clothes had to be nothing more than a coincidence. At the same time, crouched low to the ground, gathering his books that had spilled across the floor. Without warning, someone's hand appeared, picking up one of the objects before offering it to him. Accepted the item with a bright, appreciative smile, expressing gratitude to the stranger repeatedly. In the very next instant, that identical hand landed solidly on his shoulder, and a voice praised him for maintaining his composure, remarking that this control was what defined a good zombie. A member of the junior varsity team stood motionless, stunned by what had just been said. As he glanced upward, he recognized the figure standing before him as C, the very man destined to become his future employer. Sprang upright, demanding to know the stranger's identity. The question brought Jiangxi to an abrupt halt. Jiangxi transformed into his second form, a cold smile spreading over his features. He silently warned the young opponent not to squander anger on those beneath his notice. A surge of deadly energy swept through the air. The weight was so overwhelming that JV found himself unable to lift his eyelids. After he managed to pry his eyes open, he saw that the street was deserted. There was no sign of Jiangxi anywhere. A strange feeling swept over the character as they noticed the figure before them, someone who looked neither fully human nor entirely like a zombie. His throat felt parched as he forced himself to swallow. A chilling presence seemed to fill the air, leaving them to wonder if the intense stress was making them imagine things that weren't really there. To him, Jiangxi followed quietly from a hidden spot, closely observing everything he did. Not much time passed before return to the school building. Noticing his messy appearance, the other students began to murmur among themselves, commenting on how he had been picked on once more and questioning why he never stood up for himself, even calling him a coward. The thug, still basking in his own success, proudly brandished his physical test results, thinking that even though he couldn't operate nanotech armor, the prospect of becoming a mech soldier was still a worthwhile achievement. In a society that valued power above all else, those who preferred books over brawn like him were seen as insignificant. Despite his intelligence, studying wouldn't help anyone survive a zombie attack. With advanced nanotech armor already available, there seemed to be little need for developing new weapons. JV heard the taunting voices around him, causing him to drop his gaze as he made his way quietly into the classroom. Observed the scene as events played out before her eyes, letting out a quiet sigh. She realized she had been worrying for no reason. The man before her showed no signs of violence or cruelty. Despite everything, she remained confused about one thing. The Central District was known for its safety, with the city's walls always keeping zombies at bay. She couldn't understand how they had managed to show up here so unexpectedly. At the same time, Jiangxi was positioned on a rooftop, his eyes fixed on below. Standing next to him, hesitantly wondered if their leader truly believed that the young newcomer could ever fit in with their group. Jiangxi reverted to his original form and let a sly smile cross his face. He believed that only a test could reveal the answers they needed. The character recalled how the other person had freed the small lab rat, setting it loose and giving them a chance to make things more interesting. He lifted his hand at a gradual pace. A pale green light suddenly illuminated the area, and on the deserted ground just beyond the campus, small pools of green blood began to materialize. The droplets merged, swirling into a pattern that resembled strands of genetic code. From empty space, muscle and bone started to form, weaving together as if materializing out of thin air. Within seconds, Jiangxi commanded the formation of a zombie army. Suddenly, his hand curled tightly into a fist. His body transformed as it shifted into a new, more powerful form. Suddenly, the zombies began to move, their eyes shining with a ravenous desire. Colossal creatures loomed above the rest, some reaching heights greater than 10 meters. The group scaled the nearby structures, poised atop them as they awaited Jiangxi's signal to swoop down on the people below. At the same time, focused intently on her studies in class, oblivious to the approaching threat lurking nearby. At that moment, a man dressed in a crisp business suit arrived at the entrance to the school. He drew a long breath, relishing the fresh sense of liberty that came with being outdoors. Without any sign, pieces of his skin suddenly peeled away from his face. He frantically tried to cover the decaying flesh with his hand, desperately attempting to hold it together. He whispered quietly to himself, nearly exposing his presence, as he arrived at what he believed must be the school lord had spoken about. The man standing before them was recognized as the infamous rookie zombie, one of the uncommon undead beings who retained complete awareness. Falling to his knees, he humbly inquired what the lord wanted him to do. Flung a pile of documents onto the ground at his feet, his voice icy as he commanded his followers to consume every person within the academy, an academy that happened to be the place where was enrolled. The zombies' eyes sparkled with excitement as they gazed at their meal. For this one, the very first assignment had turned out to be a banquet beyond expectations, just what they wanted. Hatred for humans burned strongest within them. Since the earliest memories he possessed, he had suffered relentless pain as a subject of human experiments. Long ago, he had made a vow to take back all that was taken from him, and to erase every trace of humanity and their offspring from existence. Although he knew that even the fiercest opponent couldn't defeat him, a feeling of unease slowly invaded his mind. He wondered why Lord Hay had sent so many reinforcements to help him. After all, this small academy should have been an effortless target, unless it was hiding something dangerous within its walls. Despite his self-assurance, he chose to act carefully, deciding it was wiser to survey the area before making a move. Moving quietly, he entered the principal's office without making a sound. He concealed his true feelings behind a friendly facade, pretending to be courteous as he approached and requested assistance from the man. At the same time, his outstanding academic achievements led the Education Bureau to grant him permission to attempt an advanced examination. Achieving a perfect score would grant him the opportunity to enter the university ahead of schedule. Walked back to his desk, excitement bubbling inside him as he clutched the exam sheet in his hands. He believed that completing this test would be his ticket into university. At that moment, the school's loudspeakers suddenly crackled to life. A notice instructed every student to report to the gymnasium without delay. Although hesitated to abandon his test, the announcement left him with no alternative but to comply. On the stage, the principal cleared his throat and informed everyone that, because of unusual circumstances, a new student would be joining their academy. He then introduced May and asked the students to welcome her. The principal looked anxiously as she made her way onto the stage, taking her time to introduce herself with careful, measured words. Curiosity swept over the students as murmurs passed from one person to another. Many wondered in disbelief why, even in high school, there were still new students arriving. Just then, a pack of troublemakers pushed AJV ahead, forcing him to the very front of the crowd. His eyes fixed on him at once, realization dawning. The task Lord Hay had given her was never meant to be easy. Someone else like her was already present. It became clear that that this school fell under his domain, and he regarded the humans around him as nothing more than livestock. Thankfully, they had resisted the urge to barge in unannounced, recognizing that such an action would have come across as impolite. After considering the situation, concluded that confrontation was unnecessary at this point, so she opted to silently watch for a while. As the days slipped by, weeks accumulated, and before long, a whole month had come and gone. At that point in his life, focused solely on his studies and the routine journeys he made to each new study session, felt completely confused, unable to understand how he seemed to go without eating. She wondered if he ever bothered to have meals, or if he simply filled up on studying instead. His expression made him seem like an obvious victim, hardly the appearance one would expect from a zombie. Just as decided to continue observing, a group led by a troublemaker swaggered toward the scene, clearly intent on starting trouble with a new transfer student. The thug struck May's shoulder with an open palm and gave a mocking grin. He acknowledged noticing the newcomer lurking nearby each day, and insisted that May follow him, hinting that he had something important to discuss. Despite feeling irritable, Meiji's spirits lifted when she noticed him. Within moments, terrified screams rang out across the rooftop of the school. Fortunately, had merely frightened the thugs instead of causing them real harm. The three fools were left unharmed, spared from being eaten. He let out a low, unsettling laugh, noting that the other person should feel lucky they weren't on his territory. While he didn't care much about what he ate, he knew that taking prey from someone else's land would likely cause serious trouble. The man struck the thug with enough force to knock out several of his front teeth, which scattered through the air. He shifted his gaze elsewhere, realizing it was time to reveal his intentions to AJV. With the academy brimming with humans, he believed AJV could afford to give him a portion. The following morning, was seated in his classroom, concentrating intently on his schoolwork. A reserved girl from the class stepped forward, extending her hand with a small container. She explained that it was ointment meant for treating cuts, and mentioned that it would speed up the healing of his injuries. She handed over the pepper spray, explaining that if anyone tried to bully them again, they should use it to defend themselves by spraying it in the bully's eyes. She extended her hand and softly tapped JV on the head in a reassuring gesture. Without hesitation, the person hurried out of the classroom, watched her walk away, utterly confused by the unusual gesture she had just made. At the same time, watched from his hidden spot just beyond the doorway, careful not to be seen. She had arrived with the intention of delivering medicine to JV. As she observed the situation develop, irritation filled her, causing her to puff out her cheeks. Under her breath, she grumbled about how foolish was, and realized her earlier concern had been unnecessary. At that moment, she moved quickly past, who had just shown up to meet V. The fragrance surrounding him quickly drew Fang's notice. Burst into the classroom, flinging the door wide with a loud crash. The sudden noise startled the students, who began murmuring to each other about the newcomer who had defeated the notorious school bully the day before, wondering if he now intended to challenge as well. May walked directly over to JV's desk and took a seat next to him. Without hesitation, she confronted him, making it clear that she knew he had noticed her as soon as she arrived at the school. He acknowledged that this area belonged to the other person and proposed a deal, suggesting they divide the share 70-30, offering the larger portion, 70%, to the rightful owner. V remained silent, offering no response, persisted, ultimately agreeing to settle for an 80-20 split. May continued to wait, but nothing happened. Her mouth hung open in shock, unable to believe what was unfolding. She couldn't accept that her brother would refuse to share with her. All around them, the school teemed with humans, and she wondered how he could possibly handle them all on his own. The students standing close by observed as bent down in such a humble manner. The conversation between the two left everyone around them utterly confused, as no one could make sense of what they were discussing. Didn't respond, so May decided to make another attempt. She suggested that she would simply take whatever didn't finish. She then told the girls that they could have the top portion, while she would claim the bottom, proposing this as their agreement. V remained silent, offering no response, his face contorted with anger as she realized she had humbled herself this much, yet her efforts still met with refusal. She wondered if the kid was insulting her by not accepting, feeling as though she was being looked down upon. Right before V could quietly say that what the other person wanted didn't concern him, he hesitated, rushed into the classroom, and called out loudly, warning JV to keep his distance from the other student. At that moment, she hurled a spear that gleamed as it left her grasp, was caught off guard, unable to respond before the object shot directly through his chest. The force sent him crashing straight through the wall of the classroom. He was slammed down onto the vivid green grass of the soccer field outside. A member of the junior varsity team stood motionless, stunned by how quickly quickly the situation had changed. The rest of the class erupted into frightened screams, moved ahead with urgency, urging everyone nearby to seek shelter because the area was unsafe. She stood in front of the broken wall, her gaze fixed intently on whose body was trapped against the surface. A new weapon appeared in her grasp while she bared her teeth in anger, demanding to know whether they thought she was either foolish or unable to see the truth. Upon hearing those words, abandoned any attempt to hide her true feelings, deciding there was no longer a need to restrain herself, sprang onto the field and touched down with a loud, solid thump. She urgently signaled for the students to disperse, warning them that there was a zombie among them. As soon as she finished speaking, a deafening crash burst out from May's body. His body expanded in a disturbing way as his muscles twisted and bulged beneath his skin. Within moments, hideous zombies started clawing their way out from inside him. Without warning, the field became overrun by every imaginable type of monstrous creature. Simultaneously, large groups of airborne zombies surged onto the campus from the outside. With the ritual finished, Mei Jiji bellowed an order to seal the surroundings and ensure that not a single human escaped capture. Humans fled in every direction, overwhelmed by fear. Mei stretched his shoulders, a cold smile spreading across his face. The effort of acting for an entire month had worn him out, but now relief washed over him as he embraced his true self once more. Wasted no time in triggering her advanced armor. In an instant, a wave of nanotechnology swept over her form, enveloping her in a brilliant burst of light. Remained completely unafraid, silently challenging the idea that humans were the only ones allowed to enjoy such toys. With a fierce motion, he yanked his shirt apart, fabric splitting under his grip. Stared ahead, her eyes growing wide with astonishment. Secured around his waist rested a relic of old, a device crafted for transformation. As the device activated, waves of shadowy energy surged outward, and within seconds, a sharp-edged made of nanotechnology wrapped itself around his form. This was the same invention that her father had devoted his efforts to creating. The people running away quickly became aware of the commotion. They halted abruptly and glanced over their shoulders. What appeared before their eyes rendered them completely silent as disbelief washed over them. A zombie appeared before them, surprisingly clad in armor crafted from advanced human nanotechnology. Gave a sly smile as she teased her opponent, making it clear that Miss owed her abilities to her own father's actions. Wanted her to understand that the power she held was possible only because of him. A recollection from Fang's early years suddenly surged into her thoughts as she heard those words. Her face went rigid with shock as she struggled to process what she heard. The thought echoed in her mind. Was this person truly named May? The person wondered if the figure before them was the zombie that had once come from their father's former laboratory. Let out an angry roar, her fury unmistakable. She recalled being among the earliest individuals chosen for experimentation, and accused the humans of robbing her of the ability to have children. The memories of the family's harshness had left a permanent mark on them, and on this day, they were determined to seek justice for every wrong, both past and present. Fawn shifted her posture, ready for battle, her gaze intense and unwavering. She signaled the end of conversation, daring her opponent to make the first move. Hurled himself forward, his fist cutting through the air with the force and speed of a fired cannonball. Quickly lowered herself, moving out of the way just in time. She responded by swinging her enormous sword, yet he dodged effortlessly and moved swiftly to position himself behind her. She spun around abruptly. The character was abruptly stopped as a fierce kick landed squarely in their stomach. The force of the blow launched her high above the ground, sending her soaring nearly 100 meters into the sky. Mei Jiji crouched down, her muscles tensing as if ready to spring. Suddenly, the figure burst into the air and flew high above her. In its mind echoed bitter thoughts about the humans below, resentment for the years of torment it had endured. The creature vowed to return that agony to them many times over. A deafening noise filled the air as his fist slammed down, driving forcefully into the ground. The impact sent shockwaves through the field, causing the earth to break open and scatter in jagged pieces, resembling broken glass. At the same time, elsewhere on campus, a zombie closed in on a girl, ready to attack her. Just before it was too late, a wooden stick came crashing down, striking the creature squarely in the face. Blondie and his gang of delinquents appeared, their presence impossible to ignore. Despite their reputation as the squad, they demanded respect and refused to be dismissed. Blondie commanded his men to lead the others out, using the rear exit. One girl cried out in desperation, pointing out that JV remained in the classroom, still working to complete his exam. Blondie stopped in her tracks, completely stunned. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. He was actually busy with schoolwork at that moment. Deciding he wasn't worth her attention, she quickly dismissed him from her thoughts. He noticed the desperate expression in her eyes, silently asking for someone to rescue her. His determination faltered as he remembered their bond as classmates, realizing they couldn't possibly abandon one of their own. In another part of the arena, reeled, struggling to keep her balance after enduring two powerful blows from AGG. An icy fear swept over her as she tried to comprehend the force behind the attacks. She wondered with disbelief how her opponent could push his armor beyond its limits without any sign of stopping. Without warning, memories of her father's voice from her youth echoed in her mind, reminding her that the nanotech armor had been passed down through their family for generations. With its immense strength came an equally heavy responsibility. Anyone seeking to surpass their own boundaries without falling apart needed a firm and unwavering belief in themselves. The suit functioned in direct response to the strength of the wearer's determination. With her hands balled tightly, pushed herself upright. Brilliant blue streaks of lightning crackled over her armor, signaling that its power was now surging far past what was considered safe. Her mind focused solely on defeating Gigi, and with that determination, she broke past her own limits, releasing a surge of power unlike anything she had ever displayed before. In an instant, she surged ahead with lightning speed. He seized the other's face with a grip as strong as iron. A sudden, fierce blow from an elbow sent him crashing hard to the ground. The collision echoed with a deafening roar, splintering the whole field into a tangled web of jagged cracks. At the same time, within the classroom walls, completed his university entrance examination. With a triumphant laugh, the characters celebrated the completion of their work, feeling excited about the journey to college that awaited them. He had just finished tucking the paper out of sight when Blondie rushed into the room, struggling to catch her breath. Before AJV had a chance to respond, Blondie seized him and dashed away. Blondie couldn't believe AJV was actually doing homework at a time like this. If it hadn't been for the girl pleading with him, Blondie would have left AJV behind without a second thought. As JV observed the blonde-haired boy sprinting with full determination, he started to reconsider his earlier opinion, realizing that maybe the guy wasn't so bad after all. The moment they exited the classroom, the clash between and had already erupted in the vicinity. Both fighters matched each other in strength and skill, their attacks so powerful that the walls themselves trembled with every strike. At that moment, one of Blondie's yelled that the back gate was stuck and wouldn't budge. The dam's design made the walls even stronger. They stretched 10 meters tall and pulsed with a deadly force of 100,000 volts. Anyone who dared to make contact would be instantly electrocuted. Blondie muttered a harsh insult under their breath, frustration evident as they lashed out with a futile kick against the door. A member of the junior varsity team moved ahead, expressing a desire to give it a shot. Within moments, he swiftly bypassed the digital lock security by unraveling its code. They bypassed the controls, shut off the electricity, and forced the gate to swing wide open. A wave of excitement swept through the group as they broke out in joyful applause. Blondie gave him a hearty pat on the back, remarking on how useful guestbooks could be in situations like this. He promised that if they managed to survive, he would never torment him again. Let out a deep sigh, unable to find any words to express what he was feeling. As soon as they burst outside, their joy quickly shifted into fear. The way ahead left them rooted to the spot, unable to move. A massive zombie giant kept watch over the area. Leading a vast army, the figure stood in the way, preventing the humans from reaching those in need. On the battlefield, cast a mocking look at, her lips curling into a sneer. She believed the area was completely blocked off, certain that attempt to delay her so the students could get away was pointless. With a cold confidence, told to look over her shoulder, shifted her gaze to the side. He looked around and realized that all the students were encircled by the living dead. Even Odd JV and Blondie had no choice but to retreat indoors. Her teeth pressed tightly together as determination filled her thoughts. She refused to accept defeat and was certain that an alternative solution existed. She lifted off the ground, drawing out every ounce of strength from her armor. Brilliant weapons appeared all around her, swirling in a dazzling display of light. Every textbook stated plainly that a zombie's vulnerability was its head. Once it was destroyed, the monster would be reduced to nothing but a lifeless body. Keeping that thought focused intently on Gigi's head, he simply flashed a sly smile and sprang toward her, clearly confident. He believed she was no match for him and thought she was foolish to challenge someone of his skill. His fist shot forward, aiming directly at her with powerful force. She moved just fast enough to avoid the danger. If the blow had landed, she would have been completely overpowered. A powerful shockwave swept through the gym, tossing the nearby students through the air as if they were weightless dolls. A JV school bag became trapped in the explosion and was hurled skyward. Acting on instinct, he dashed after the object, desperate because his valuable exam papers were enclosed within it. Blondie extended a hand in an attempt to halt his actions, but the moment had already slipped away. His presence intensified, with her energy winding inward, growing more concentrated with each passing moment. Suddenly, his abilities surged to their maximum, unleashing an overwhelming force. The summoned weapons that had been pursuing her broke apart, their impact bursting through her visor. The blades veered away from their intended path. The blade cut directly through AJV's bag, splitting the exam paper cleanly in half. During that part of the story, the sword sliced through AJV's neck, cutting off his head in one swift motion. A young girl let out a shrill scream as she quickly shielded her eyes with her hands. Blondie and his group stopped in their tracks, their expressions filled with terror. Fang's eyes widened in shock as she witnessed witnessed his head roll along the earth. Her thoughts struggled to comprehend the reality before her eyes. She braced herself, gathering every ounce of strength for a final, determined attack. As Mei Jiji glanced over, a chuckle escaped, accompanied by a light-hearted admission of accidentally causing trouble, playfully acknowledging the mistake to her brother. Guy tilted his head back and let out a deep, triumphant laugh. The source of unpredictability had vanished, leaving him free to unleash his true power at last. Blondie and his group immediately shifted their attention to the spot where it had collapsed. In an instant, shock widened their eyes so much it looked as if they might burst from their faces. A junior varsity player approached the group, gripping his own detached head by its hair. He pressed his foot against Blondie's face, a sneer curling on his lips. Once, Blondie had taken pleasure in tormenting him, but now the roles were reversed, and fear had replaced Blondie's former bravado. Without hesitation, he kicked Blondie forcefully, sending him flying across the room as if he were a football. All around them, students shrieked in terror at the sight of a ghost and scattered in every possible direction. Fang turned swiftly to face the source of the disturbance. Overwhelmed by disbelief, they stood motionless as the headless figure of JV advanced toward them, looked in the same direction as the other person. He almost lost control out of sheer shock, unable to believe how unbelievable the situation had become. Rather than launching an attack on him, his focus remained directed at something different. He stared intently at the torn pieces of his test sheet scattered before him, felt a wave of dread wash over him as his heart sank. He lifted his hands in surrender, trying to explain that it had been an accident and insisting he hadn't meant for it to happen. Before anyone could react, abruptly whipped his head around, using it with the force and intent of a swinging mace. With a swift motion, he launched it powerfully, sending it flying directly and striking. The zombie reacted so slowly that it couldn't even manage to blink in time. A sharp cracking sound filled the air as the skull struck forcefully against his chest. The immense power hurled him 1,000 meters across the sky, sending him plummeting back to earth with the impact of a falling shell. The students remained motionless, their mouths agape in shock. They watched as he turned his own head into a weapon against his opponent. The scene was harsh and violent. They struggled to believe that this fierce person was the same awkward JV they once knew. Blondie lay sprawled on the floor, tears streaming down his face as he desperately called out for his mother, completely devastated. A girl, her body shaking, softly reminded Ah that she had given him medicine earlier, hoping he would recall. He paid no attention to her and abruptly crouched down, causing the floor beneath him to split open with a sharp crack. In a sudden burst of speed, he hurled himself ahead with the force of a rocket, sending out a powerful gust that flung nearby students off their feet. From his vantage point on the rooftop, C's lips curled into a smirk as he silently acknowledged the impressive surge of power he had just witnessed. Meiji continued to spin helplessly through the air, struggling to steady himself as he fought to regain control. He gazed at the airborne head, his voice trembling with fear as he demanded to know what the creature was. His body had already surged forward, moving ahead without hesitation. He caught his own detached head before it could hit the ground. With a swift motion, the figure somersaulted through the air and came to a stop directly above Meiji. Mate urgently asked his brother to pause and hear him out before saying anything else. He responded with nothing but a cold, menacing laugh that sent shivers down the spine. May bared her teeth in a fierce snarl and responded with a defiant roar, warning her opponent not to test her limits and making it clear she would not simply accept the situation without a fight. A sharp crack echoed as used his own skull like a hammer, driving it forcefully into May's chest. A burst of brilliant green light exploded, while Mate GG fell rapidly toward the ground. On the battlefield, both soldiers and zombies stopped in their tracks, their attention locked on the unfolding event. The crowd erupted into panic, fleeing in all directions as fear took hold of them. A junior varsity missile struck the ground with a thunderous explosion, sending a shockwave that tore deep cracks across the landscape. Before it could even land, AJV had already snapped his head forward once more, was hit with such force that she was launched high into the air. He barreled right through a towering skyscraper, sending shards of glass and chunks of concrete crashing to the ground below. Right when the JV team prepared to start the pursuit, zombies closed in from every direction, quickly forming a tight circle around him. In response to the orders given by the massive corpse beast, the swarm advanced with the unstoppable force of rushing water. Narrowed his eyes and swiftly turned on his heel. He unleashed a thunderous roar that seemed to tear through the heavens themselves. The blast tore through the area with incredible force, instantly reducing the nearby zombies to nothing but drifting ash. The force of the explosion sent nearby people flying, leaving blood streaming from their ears and noses. AJV lowered himself into a crouch, punctuating the movement with a dismissive, icy snort. A thunderous sound sound erupted as he propelled himself skyward, soaring after Mei with the force and speed of a fired cannonball. The troops below gazed in shock as the mysterious figure flew overhead, clutching his own detached head. One of the group nervously reported through his communicator that he saw a man soaring through the air, carrying his own head and effortlessly cutting down the zombies. High above, JV managed to reach Mei in the sky. He lashed out with his head, using it as a battering ram to strike his opponent with fierce force. Cried out in despair, helpless as she was thrown about with no control, resembling a discarded toy. He furrowed his brow and quietly informed Jiangxi that the person in question was unlikely to endure for much longer. Jiangxi responded with a cold sneer, realizing that the boy possessed immortality, which made him a much more intriguing opponent in her eyes. At the same time, as V swept away the remaining threats on the battlefield, the human soldiers broke through the campus defenses and launched their rescue mission. Acting as a helpful classmate, she assisted as they made their way toward the doorway. A thunderous noise erupted as an enormous object slammed down from the sky. GG found themselves slammed to the ground once more by its relentless force. Only a few moments passed before JV crashed down, shaking the ground so hard that fractures spread out like spiderwebs from where he landed. Everyone stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear at the mere sight of him. Hastily jotted down notes as he delivered his report to Jiangxi. He explained that the subject's results were almost perfect, with a deformity index that showed no flaws, precisely matching the standards Jiangxi had imagined. His strength surpassed all reason, and if he continued to grow without restraint, the chaos of his rebellion could bring society to its knees. He stopped for a moment before noting that there was still one last characteristic that had yet to be examined. Out on the field, coolly picked up his detached head and secured it back onto his shoulders. Both the soldiers and the survivors watched in terror. His hair twisted and moved as his muscles grew more defined and tense. A thunderous roar echoed as he transformed fully, revealing himself as the true AJV. His eyes widened in shock as she realized the truth. She could hardly believe it. The small zombie from before had actually been this person all along. From a distance, the injured Mei struggled to speak, her voice faint and strained. She reminded the others that she had already expressed regret for ruining the exam paper. Mei recalled how she had been told the students belonged to her, and questioned why she was being targeted despite that. JV looked at the others with a mocking sneer, his tone filled with scorn as he questioned when he had ever made such a promise. He declared that everything belonged to him, insisting that if he couldn't recall making a promise, then it must never have happened. His anger erupted, her thoughts seething with contempt as she accused the other of being a shameless liar and a disgrace to all zombies, no better than the humans they despised. He let out a fierce roar as he struggled to his feet, determined to show he wasn't intimidated. Tension filled the atmosphere as the opponents themselves for another fierce confrontation. Meanwhile, her classmates edged cautiously toward the doorway, their bodies shaking with fear. A cold realization struck them, could be even more frightening than. Just as the group neared the entrance to the academy, something happened. A deafening rush tore through the atmosphere as an enormous rock plummeted from above. A loud crash echoed as the object struck the entrance, blocking the group's sole way out. A wave of panic swept through the crowd, rapidly overtaking any sense of calm. The expressions that once held hope now reflected nothing but fear and despair. A dark silhouette stretched across the floor behind the group, advanced, a wicked smile spreading across his face. He reminded everyone, his voice low and threatening, that they were all under his control and that no one could escape without his approval.
Lately, I've had a strong addiction to watching manhwa and manga recap videos. Every single day, I find myself binging one after another, losing hours and days doing absolutely nothing productive. And honestly, it's getting out of hand. So, maybe we can make these viral videos too. I mean, look at the views, the growth, the community these creators are building. It looks simple, right? But that's a trap. You go down this endless rabbit hole spending money, losing sleep, hiring editors and writers from Fiverr and Upwork and still feel like you've been robbed. Because don't forget how emotional the YouTube algorithm can be with making videos go viral. It's unpredictable, especially when the market's saturated, competition's relentless, and somehow other creators are dropping 10-hour videos daily while you're stuck trying to finish one. That's when I realized something had to change. So, I built the solution, the Web2 Narrative Suite, a complete one-click system that handles everything from cropping, script narration, text-to-speech, image processing, and full video generation in one smooth process. Save money, reduce hours of work, and have a tool that only gives you straight results. Click on the link down below and experience it for yourself. And if you want even more tools to supercharge your YouTube recap journey, visit my Ko-Fi and Patreon pages where I drop weekly new tools designed to keep you ahead as AI continues to steal our jobs. So tap in now before you get left behind.